Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Monday morning open meeting. Been informed that Ryan will be moving that to a different date. He's on spring break this week, so prosecuting attorney will be moved to a different date. So we have risk management.
Okay, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director, and I'll first go over the financials for risk management. So the first item is industrial accident insurance fund. And we're continuing to modify these to make them a little easier, hopefully, to go over. So we have one page the first page is revenues, and it's comparing current year budget to current year-to-date actuals, which is through March 25th. And so we don't have any unfavorable variances to report right now. Hopefully we won't. And we've received in most of our revenues because this is a service department and we bill out all the departments. And it looks like just about everybody has paid their annual assessment for this fund. And then last year, again, the blue is budget on the bar graphs, and then the green is actuals. And these are for prior year, it's the full year of actuals. And last year's revenue was greater than what we budgeted, and that's primarily because of investment income being higher than what we budgeted. So on the expenses for industrial accident, which is we also call it workman's comp when we do our presentations. We have on our expenses, we've paid out one of our major policies, which is the excess workers' comp policy. So that's what's in the actuals. That 205,173 includes payments we've already made. And there may be some year-end adjustments for this fund, possibly because they'll probably have accruals related to claims liability and reserves. So not very much. The majority of our expenses are our excess workers' comp policy, and then the other expenses are claims. And we don't, when you see our presentation a little bit, you'll see we haven't paid out that much yet in the first 3 months on claims. And then if you don't have any questions on industrial accident, I'll move to risk management. So again, risk management is where we have our property and our liability assessments. This is primarily activity related to being members of the risk pool. And so on our revenue side, we have billed out our annual billings for our departments. And again, almost all of our departments have paid their assessments, their annual billings. So we have a favorable variance there. Last year, revenues to actuals was a little bit under what we had budgeted. And then on the expenditure side, we have not a lot of expenditures have come in yet. The annual assessments where we pay the risk pool is typically due in October of every year. They are looking at changing that to being an annual billing and trying to align their financials with most of the counties, which is a calendar year. They're currently on an October 1 to September 30th annual year for their financials. And so they're going to make that change, I think in 2020, So there was a vote taken this past week on their meeting, and so they're going to be changing that. So most of our premiums or assessments are due later in the year. The unfavorable variances are really very immaterial right now. We also have a transfer that's showing as unfavorable, but that's because last year we did not have a transfer out for the liability claim account. And this year we do. We budgeted for it and we've already made that transfer. Again, there may be some year-end adjustments to 2023 related to prepaid assets and claim reserves, but those haven't been recorded yet. If you don't have any questions there, I'll go to liability claims. This is where we actually, for the risk pool, if there is a claim, we pay up to $100,000 on most of those. On property losses, we pay up to $5,000. So we haven't had any expenses. So the only revenue is the transfer in, and we've had on expenses on page 2, we've had just a few expenses related to our litigation cost. So nothing major to report there. And that's all I have on the financials, in case, unless you have some questions. And as you recommended, I'll probably just go over their financials. Risk management comes every month. I'll probably only do their financials quarterly.
Good.
Now now Bailey, if you want to bring up our risk management performance.
Scott Kaline, risk analyst. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so this is our workers' compensation for the total paid of claims by year of loss, starting back in 2017. So not much has changed. I presented this last time. One of the requests from the commissioners was to kind of highlight the outlier in 2019 for the shooting of the police officer. So that cost is associated with actually 3 separate claims for that specific incident, totaling for $590,000. Not much has updated this year. I think it's 20,000 for what we paid so far in workers' comp. So about 10,000 more than what we paid last month. Next slide. This is showing the open, pending, and closed cases claims that we've accrued over since starting 2017. And we have 17 total for pending and open claims as of today. Next slide. This graph is outlaying it by each claim, by the cause of injury. Most common is slips and falls, which is pretty common, and is knowing that this is our highest possible cause of injury, and it's on trend for our previous years as well. So, and this is for open claims.
Is there any pattern unique or for any particular department where the slips and falls are happening more frequently?
Yeah, there's a few departments, your typical departments, sheriff's department, public works, the ones that are out in the field. The thing about slips and falls is that anybody's susceptible. So there's a slips and fall from the clerk's office could happen. So that's why it's so common, is that it's not just isolated in the field, that can also happen in the administrations as well. So that is typically our most common. It's also more common in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year because of weather. Next slide, please. This is broken out by injury by department for open and pending claims. So as of today, we have 5 for solid waste and 4 for sheriff, which is also typical for trending year. So nothing too out of the ordinary on these. It's your typical spread for injuries. So just a review of the information. So open claims, we have 13. 4 we have pending, 4 pending claims, and closed since 2017, 138. And our most common total is slips and falls. Next slide.
On the liability claims, this is with our risk pool items. So it doesn't repeat what's in the workers' comp claims. So we started the month off with 9 open claims. We added 3 new tort claims during March. And we have 0 closed claims during March. So for an ending right now, 12 claims, which is, since I've been here, is probably one of the higher months of claims, open claims.
Any questions on this one? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're on to safety. These are currently what we're working on in our safety program. An update on the AED contracts. We have decided that we're actually going to collect more data. And that will help us in 2 ways. First, we don't really have a database for all of our locations for the AEDs. So that will help us with that. And then also give us an idea of how many AEDs we have in the county, as well as what types of AEDs. So that's where we're at with this. So we're sending out a survey to all departments, department locations, to see where their AEDs are located and how many they have. Onto accident prevention program. As of right now, we are looking at updating the evacuation plans for both the administration building and the Hall of Justice. We are also looking at vetting a consultant to review fire building code for the Hall of Justice. This will be congruent with the Hall of Justice security update as well. So we are still looking at pricing and quotes at this time. Injury and incident reporting, we have the forms updated electronically. Now it's just to make sure that the county has access to them. So we're gonna update the intranet site to have those forms on there. So it's easily accessible for any employee to just fill out the form online, and then that information gets sent to us in risk management. For training, we have created a newsletter that we send out every Tuesday, This is to give out more information and training opportunities to all departments who want to participate. And just to give them more resources that they can take advantage of. Some of them are coming from the risk pool or other third-party companies, as well as internal as well. So NeoGov has some as well. And to send out scholarship information that risk pool sends us. New trainings available that we had created this month was we had created the dealing with difficult customers, trespass training, and de-escalation training. All three of these are, all of these three trainings that we created were to address or to help improve employee communications with other difficult public individuals. So we're hoping that this training can kind of shed light on what to do in some difficult situations. The trespass training one has been reviewed by a couple of department heads. So that's why it's on there. And we're still waiting for feedback on how the training is going. And we'll go from there, see if we have to update it or look at adding anything to that training. Beware of surroundings and slips and falls training is actually from NeoGov. And that training is in hopes to bring awareness to slips and falls and maybe changing the conditions, since that is our most frequent injury. And that's available on NeoGov as well. And that's it. Yeah, anybody have any questions?
You know, back up just a hair to the AEDs, so I can just refresh my memory. That's like the red box out over here we have in the hallway. The
Yeah.
goal is to find out where they all are and make sure that they're in the best places they could be.
Yeah,
And then yeah, I'm trying to recall, but do we have different brands? They all don't, not necessarily work exactly the same.
yeah, the information that we have currently, we're not too sure who has what type of AED, because there are different types of AEDs. Another thing that we're not too sure about is the maintenance on those AEDs. So we don't know.
That was the other question. Then
Yep.
we have concerns, like a fire extinguisher needs to be checked every so often, right? I'm assuming these things have that same type of thing, but we're not sure ours have been.
Right, we're not
On
sure
schedule.
which ones have actual maintenance agreements or if they were just bought and then placed. And so we'd like to make sure that we have the knowledge of which ones have maintenance agreements and see and evaluate if that's the right way to go for all of them.
Yeah. That's what I remember. I was just refreshing myself.
And then if we can, we'd like to place on our evacuation maps, go ahead and place the AED locations as well on those maps. We think that would be a good add to that information.
On the AEDs, I assume you're going to cross-check with what the purchases have been. So if we only have half of what we paid for, that there's an exercise there.
Yeah,
Okay.
that goes with the surveying to see what there is some departments that have taken upon themselves to apply for a subscription based for some of these AEDs, and we just don't know what service has been done with them or if we're even utilizing those services anymore. So that survey is going to really help us kind of figure out what our AED applications are at this moment. So just a lot of data collecting at this point.
The information, I take it, is not forthcoming.
It's-
You're having a hard time getting the information or?
Well, because a lot of departments bought their own AEDs, there was no central records of that. So we're really wanting to make sure we can have a central record to make sure that we know what we have, know if it's on a maintenance agreement or not, how old is it?
So that confuses me. If I wanted to buy something, eventually it's got to go through the auditor and someone's got to cut the check and all that. I'm assuming that we did that for the AEDs also, even if it came in on a grant.
Some of the AEDs may have been bought on a procurement card too, as well. So determining the name of the vendor is a little bit extra research work if it's bought on a P card.
Now, I'm just suggesting, you know who caused the purchase to occur. And that says, okay, you tell me what you did with these AEDs and tell me everything that you know about them.
Right. And that's what the survey is going to do to help us get that information.
Yeah, the survey I interpret as out of the vacuum, I'm going to ask you, did you buy an AED? And in fact, I know that you did. So, okay.
I'm making the assumption that all buildings, they probably have guidelines, like you need one on each floor or whatever that is. And the survey will kind of make sure we're within all that stuff. I mean, I'm making that assumption.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, if
That's
I
correct.
might suggest, I wouldn't do it by any other metric other than it's got to be accessible within a minute.
Within a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think having them also on the evacuation charts will help us to determine that as well.
That means a lot of AEDs, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Has there been much use for the AEDs so far? We've had them for what, 3 years in various levels?
I hope the answer is zero.
And to my knowledge, for this past year, I don't know that we have.
yeah, I'm not too sure. I don't think so. I haven't seen in the data to show that we've used AEDs.
Since we got the new telephone system, anyone who dials 911, we receive also a ping to let us know that an outgoing 911 call has been made. Most of the ones that we received are from the jail.
Yeah. So
Huh.
going back to the specific of has it been used, I know of a particular incident in Microsoft in the Bellevue campus where there was a 29-year-old that just keeled over. He died. There was an AED right there and he got resuscitated with the AED and he's now been, it's 10 years ago, maybe it happened. And my point being, it isn't just old guys like us. And particularly we see in sports events about
Yeah.
people in presumably great health is keeling over. The heart is very complicated with its electrics. Yeah, anyhow.
So your data does show that the most frequent claim is over slips, trips and falls.
Mhm.
How are we gonna know that? My first question is, having 6 claims, is that a red flag? Or with 600 employees, that's a pretty small level of things happen and
It's a great question. I've been going off of yearly trends. I have not necessarily been using what our ratio or it's considered, it's called DART frequency is what that's called. It's actually an OSHA measure on the number of hours your employees worked divided by how many injuries you've had. We're on trend for, this is the typical, um, we're on typical trend for the injuries that we have currently. So nothing out of the extraordinary that's being shown from the amount of slips and falls we've had. Last year, we've matched that where we're at right now currently.
I'm always curious how we know if the programs you put in place work. What kind of measure do we end up using it? Of course, the numbers here. We don't have any cases with the heart problems, so we don't know if the AEDs have, I mean, potential is there, it makes sense, but
Mm.
if people don't know where they are and don't know how to use them, it's like they're not there, right? So,
Yeah, I think that's the biggest risk there, that AED instruction thing has to be big print and has to be 3 simple steps.
That's,
should
that,
be easy. Yep.
that actually is another, a point to make, is that some of these AED packages that you buy are either single devices with nothing attached to them as far as placards go, or extra batteries. It just depends on the cost. The cost ranging between $300 to $600 per unit. That's the typical standard, is what I found. So we're not, that's another point. It's a great point, is that if they're just buying the AEDs, are they putting them in, wall cabinets, or are there any placards associated with these? So
I see what you're saying. Are they sitting in the shelf somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, belaboring that point, if it requires training, the AED is probably not going to be useful.
that's another great point. We are actually in the works of setting something up for the county on specific training. There's multiple avenues that we can take. There's different companies that provide that kind of service around here. So, in fact, the Hall of Justice is right now, the Superior Courts are looking into taking AED training soon for their employees.
See, that's the time window you have is so small, and all of us have taken all kinds of classes. And in 6 months, it's like this first or that first. And it.
Yeah.
And the way I look at these things, it's like house insurance. I've got house insurance. I hope I don't ever have to use it, but it irks me to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. I would
Uh,
assume I've never stopped and looked at that one, but I would guess you just bring them out, turn them on, and it shows you where to set them.
They're typically pretty self-explanatory. They do a good job at self-explanatory. There's usually just 3 steps, and that's about it. It's sometimes you might have to wait to charge them. It would tell you if you need to charge them. Some of them have audible to tell you when it's ready to activate. They can get pretty complex.
In the meantime, keep the compressions going. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
In the meantime, while you're waiting for it to charge, you got to keep
Keep the
you got to keep the
CPR.
CPR going.
Mhm.
It depends on what stopped. I suspect that there are probably ones out there now where you can push a button saying, I need it, and audio comes up and it says, do this, do this, do this.
Yep. Yeah. You can, the varying price ranges from 300 to 600 is your standard AED. You can go a little bit more outlandishly more expensive. Some of those extra features cost money. I saw one that was for $2,000, but that had all the bells and whistles.
Maybe you need 2 kinds. Like if you were in a bullpen area where there are 100 employees, you might get the only expensive one there. But anyhow, it's a good mathematical exercise, Scott.
Yep, enjoying it so far, so. Any other questions?
Yeah, on the total max claims, we had 12 or 13, I think it was 12, 9, and we picked up another 3.
Right.
Do we have a notion as to how much that could mean to us? So for example, one tort might be, I stubbed my toe, well, just something cheap, and then another one, it might be my, kin died into jail, and I'm suing you for 100 million.
Yeah, so there's one claim that I looked at some of these this morning. There's one claim that has a reserve of $1 million on it. They're varying, like you said. The risk pool does evaluate all of them and determines a reserve, what they believe is the reserve for it. The 3 new ones were very new. They were towards the end of the month. So they haven't reported back to me yet what they believe the reserves are on those.
That
Um,
included a $20 million one.
The new ones, no, that's part of the 9, the
Okay.
ones we started the month out with. Yeah, there is one, that's the, several of them have a large claim amount in the tort or in the, lawsuit. But the risk pool will report back to us what they believe the reserve is for those.
How does that affect us immediately? It doesn't mean we have to reserve anything. It's for their purposes.
Right, for their purposes. Then we will use some of this information for the financials to, if we're going to set aside a liability.
In the, I see the torts coming in, but I don't typically get any outcome information. Is that possible to make that available?
Yes, so on the most of the torts, they're seeking to try to close those as quickly as possible. So, on the torts, I can provide y'all more information.
Those are the situations when we're in executive session and
Yes,
the insurance pool says, we didn't do anything wrong, but we need to pay. We go through that.
Right,
periodically.
on a few, but there are lots where I
The
drove
other
my,
ones are all within, they're either dismissed or there's.
yeah.
I drove my car over a wet paint on the road, and therefore you owe me $500. And I'm looking at that and thinking, they tell you not to do that, so I don't know how we deal with that. So I'd like to know that
Okay.
kind of thing.
There's no other questions. Any other questions? No? Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Unless we have some miscellaneous, we don't have anything till 10. Okay. We'll be back at 10. Okay. Our 10 o'clock meeting for review of the agenda. Building and planning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tracy Jackson and Wayne Nelson from Building and Planning. We just have a call for hearing on the board's agenda tomorrow, just setting the boundary line adjustment ordinance. right now for April 16th. However, I wanted to use this time to discuss with the board, what's the board's pleasure in us moving forward with it? And I'll turn it over to Wayne and we can talk about it.
So,
Okay.
so we've brought it before the planning commission and we have a unanimous recommendation to recommend approval to the board for an adoption of boundary line adjustment. The
Where
Well-
unanimous is from,
from the planning commission.
thank you.
And then we also have a unanimous vote, or largely unanimous. There's two voters that abstained on BPAC, the Building and Planning Advisory Council, recommending not to support the boundary line adjustment ordinance. Neither body got into the actual text of the ordinance itself, so it's more of a I'll say a policy matter, whether or not a formal ordinance is necessary at this point. And so we wanted to bring that same question to the board right now, since the ordinance itself hasn't been examined, just the premise or the principle of it has. We wanted to make sure that when we were in front of the board with it, well, one, that the board understood that, and two, if based on prior conversations with the board, if you guys are still wanting to move forward with considering the ordinance.
If I could, so the BPAC says no and the planning commission says yes.
Correct.
And you fed this through our attorneys,
Yes.
and the attorneys say what you've got is acceptable.
Correct. And content, they were very clear with what the boundary line adjustment can and can't do with respect to the exemption under the state subdivision code, 5817.
Can you present to us the beef? And BPAC doesn't like it, and if you can tell us why that is in a sort of hierarchical way. In other words, the more consequential aspect of it.
Just largely in principle alone, that it's, in their viewpoint, unnecessary legislation. It's a unnecessary regulation because it's exempt at the state level, and so why add a local rule?
So that translates into further work or cost for a citizen in Cowlitz County?
In my opinion, it would cause less, because whether there's a formal ordinance in place or not, the same amount of work and generally more goes into, I'll say, cleaning up or rectifying situations where there has been a illegal division of land or a non-conforming boundary line adjustment versus reviewing them on the upfront. And so it doesn't change whether a proposed boundary line adjustment is in compliance with state or local code, but when that's revealed and how it's resolved.
So the BPAC doesn't want to spend the dollars today to avoid a problem tomorrow?
Correct.
Is what you just said?
Is my interpretation of their, right.
And the planning commission they see the big picture is what you would say then?
Again, that's my interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
So remind me again, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And how is it going to help the landowner?
So currently, there is no formal boundary line adjustment review process. We have, I'll call it an informal process, where we actually charge a fee and we issue a letter of approval or denial, but there's no ordinance backing that up. There's no enacting or enabling ordinance to do so.
So again, what's the particular problem?
So what happens is without the requirement for a formal review, boundary line adjustments get recorded and they go through the assessor's office, and not until somebody applies for a building permit do we look at it for legal lot status as well as conforming lot status. And so what we see happening is subsequent purchasers are sold a property, they come in for a boundary or for a building permit, and we have to say, hey, there's a problem with this property because it was either illegally created in the first place, or B, it was adjusted in such a way that it can't meet current requirements. And so it's either reviewing it on the front end or clean up on the back end.
And I think you had one that got turned away because of that.
Correct. That was submitted for the review. That's correct.
So anybody can have this done. It's
Yeah.
available to anybody.
Yes.
And if they choose not to, we're trying to get rid of the people that choose not to, so everybody has to comply, right? You have to go through this
Yes, it would
process.
be
You would
correct. It
have to
would-
go through this process now, even though the WAC says, leave that stuff alone. That's exempt from review.
Correct.
The WAC specifically left that out.
The RCW, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, part of the deal is, in sitting in there is listening to, and it's just one more little piece of personal rights to do something with your property that's taken away. That's kind of the gist I got from some of the conversation there. It's available to everybody, and because a few don't do it, then everybody has to pay. So I'm very protective of people's property rights, and the WAC says to leave it alone, so I wouldn't be in favor of it. If that's the answer you're looking for, you want to know one way or the other where we're gonna
Right,
side. Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
Whether or not there's a formal ordinance in place, it doesn't extinguish any of the requirements. It's more of a timing issue. And so frankly, we don't want to waste the board's time. We've taken it to this point, and so we're at the final hour. And again, we haven't even examined the content of the ordinance itself, just the principle of it. And if that's dead on arrival here, so be it.
Well, if you're just looking for where we stand, I'll tell you where I stand, and I'm a no.
So I guess I'm still a little bit unclear as to how often we're confronted with the fact that there's been a property line adjustment made informally, either by encroachment, neighbors have an agreement to build a fence, and that becomes the new boundary. It doesn't get discovered until the neighbor sells and the new owner realizes, hey, wait a minute. The survey says we owe on the other side of the neighbor's fence. What's going on? So then it's an issue of, well, wait a minute. Whose property rights are being protected? The purchaser or the neighbors? And that's what you're having to go through. But is that a common occurrence?
Not terribly, no.
Okay.
It's, and the informal process we have now, it does, I'll say, vet out a majority of those because we are able to recognize those up front. And so versus a denial, we can give them guidance for conformance. So, and that's what we really strive for. So, to Commissioner Dahl's example of the one in the last year for an actual denial because there was no alternative to correct it outside of starting at the beginning. Usually we can help guide them through a correct procedure.
So those little kind of sliver adjustments,
Right.
they're not a big problem
No,
to deal
No.
with. Where you have run into a problem is with parents have families and say, with a boundary line adjustment, we can create a second lot. Then that requires review.
Or-
Because you're creating a new building lot, but does it conform with the
Right.
rules and regs?
or for one reason or another, tax parcels are created over time, and over time, people begin to recognize them as legal lots of records, which they may or may not be. And so that can create issues because, hey, I've been paying taxes on this property for the last 20 years. Therefore, I have a legal lot of record, and it gets conveyed either within family or
The county said I owned it.
Right. The
Yeah,
third,
yeah.
exactly. So,
But my property actually is that way. It's 2 tax lots. But I'm in a place where I have to have 5 acres, so my 2 tax lots make up,
5 acres.
yeah,
Oh.
it makes it about 7, but
It's a boundary line
one is
adjustment
4
that should be
point
able to
something,
solve
one
that
is
problem.
something or other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this sounds to me like a relatively complex question. it- most people that do boundary line adjustment go through you and do the consult that you're talking about, and that's what you're thinking you
we-
want to require.
We asked the assessors for data on that, and over the last 2 years, it works out to about 50-50. About half go through the department and half do it on their own.
Okay, and by doing it on their own, what do you mean by that?
Meaning they either by quitclaim deed via simple legal description or by recording a survey, some sort of conveyance is recorded with the auditor that hasn't been subject to review by the department. And then
So-
it gets,
So can I make a boundary adjustment on your lot, even though I have no idea who you are?
you could record one.
That'd be pardon?
Yes, you could record it.
And if I go through this process, you would trap that?
Presumably.
Because I'm finding, the older I get, the more malfeasance I see, or the more people do devious things, even just to aggravate other people. But I don't like that Tracy Jackson. Now I'm gonna do a boundary line adjustment on her. And, it does seem a bit strange that I can do that without, I mean, I can record anything, I guess. How would how does this process prevent that from happening?
The most immediate answer to that is the underlying owners would need to sign the application. We would look at the existing ownership accordingly, and we'd also look at the deed creation. We'd look at when and how that parcel was created. And so we'd have some chain of title.
Right, but then they go record it. And how does the auditor have any idea that this was properly?
The ordinance, the draft ordinance provides for that. There's a statement that would be provided with the recording. And so
Okay.
if something were to be recorded absent of that statement, then it should alert the auditor to that.
So, most of these adjustments are made informally, and they're only discovered after the fact, right?
Approximately half.
Yeah. So you're setting up a process. And I guess the question is, what's going to require the folks to come in and go for that review? If they're not of a mind to go to the government to begin with, to authorize their boundary line adjustment that they make with their neighbor for some kind of mutual agreement, or one's bullying the other, I mean, those things kind of happen.
It would be the same situation. It wouldn't be disclosed until they came in for a building permit. So there's, it would simply be an illegal division of land, and it would be caught at the time of permit.
And what triggered all of this is what we're really finding at the counter now, because the 10-acre segs become 5 acres and then they divide those up into short plats. If it's, if this is 8 acres and you've got straight 2-acre parcels and they all have the right, the road frontage and they all have the minimum lot size, and then that is fantastic for if it's a 2-acre minimum. But after they short plat it, developers and or landowners go and move the lines so it looks like a rainbow in there, and then somebody gets cut out and they don't have road access, or they've landlocked their property, they don't have the right, there's no fire truck out. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that happen. And some of these that Wayne showed at the planning commission had been moved, 3-4 times. And now I think that's a lot of the problems that has happened up on Young Road or off of Young Road and Mustang Drive in the Rose Valley area, because they all started out with larger acres. They've narrowed it down, and then now they've divided it up, and then they've moved the lines, and it's like spaghetti noodles at this point. And some people can access, and some people unfortunately are getting dinged with, really, they don't have the fire protection. They don't have anything.
And BPAC went through all that with you. They didn't go through
They-
that.
No, they were opposed to the concept of the ordinance and
Yeah.
in general.
How much extra would I have to pay to
The,
do?
the, The current fee is $360 and that
How
wouldn't
much?
change. 360. And so for those that choose not to use it, that would be an additional cost.
So if I'm buying a piece of property and I want to make sure it's all done right, I can come in and you'll do that for me today.
Correct. Through a planning
But
clearance.
It's available,
Yes,
is what I'm saying.
absolutely. It is.
Yeah. And if a realtor, most realtors are gonna tell their people they should have this done. If I'm one that chooses not to, then I've kind of made my own bed, haven't I?
Correct.
It's an interesting thing because I bought this property when I first moved up here and it was purchased from the president of Pac Tech. So I had every confidence that everything was on the up and coming. And there were some issues arose and I went to the county and found out that there wasn't even an occupancy permit on the house, even though it had been inhabited for 2 or 3 years before. And then I pursued that a little more and found out that there wasn't even a final on it. And there were other issues, but not to go in there. So it becomes a question like, who do we encumber? And that's why I say it's complicated. I just don't know. Most of us are going to take people at face value. When I've never gone to the building and planning department before I've purchased a house. I will do so from now on, but that's kind of what's the norm out there? What's the expectation?
Well, I've also heard that even title insurance reports don't seem to be worth the
You got
paper they're
it.
printed on.
Yeah, I agree.
We keep looking for government to fix all of our problems and there's
Well, the recording of property ownership is a pretty basic and important function of government. That's one of the reasons we even have a government. So there is that responsibility to make sure people who own property have that record and it's protected in a court of law and all that stuff. I guess the question is, to what extent do we try to cause or prevent problems from happening when people don't normally go to the government first when they're buying and purchasing property? That's expecting a change in behavior that doesn't. It may be more common in an urban area where in a city where the lots are pretty much defined by sidewalk, and curbs and stuff like that. But the farther you get out, people don't want those rules and regulations to begin with, so they don't bother to show up. And when the property eventually gets sold, probably by the next generation, those informal bonds disappear and all of a sudden there's a new survey and the property lines are different. And then they come to the government and say, how come you didn't help me out? But Aaron's right. I mean, it's pretty complex because people do get hurt. And there are those who do get bullied by neighbors and those are unfortunate things. I don't know what the answer is though.
I see the county engineer in the audience. Would she have any commentary at all on this issue? I guess she does.
So the answer is not really, because it's a private property issue and most of this is all on property, private property. So I don't have a real commentary on this. The only way I've seen it is some of these big ones going to small ones and private roads becoming an issue amongst neighbors. And
So in your experience, you haven't found this to be a problem at all to you in your conduct of your job?
not on public roadways. I have seen some issues on private roadways, but not out.
But you do deal with private roadways?
Yes. The issues on private roadways become when they make all these adjustments and there was not a formal subdivision, so you have a road that everybody's using and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and wants to shore plat and you go, that's not established private road. And so that can cause issues for people moving forward. That's
But
the
that has
only-
nothing to do with what was discussed here, right?
It's kind of ancillary to it because a lot of these lots are, if it's two lots and you're using a shared driveway, then the only issue we would look at is it's a shared driveway. But when they start breaking those up and moving boundaries around, they sometimes create more lots than two using a driveway. And then somebody comes in to split it up even further and they need to establish a private road. So that's the only outside of the issue that I've been involved in.
In the BPAC, those two abstentions were big developers or,
No, one was surveyor and one was habitat biologist.
and everybody else was against it regardless of what size their operation might be or what?
Correct.
Hmm. On the one hand, Mr. Chairman, I've never found that delaying adding another rule has caused an interminable problem, while I know putting another rule in often creates an interminable problem.
And I'm not blasting anybody here. The system is we get so many rules that you almost can't do anything without causing yourself a problem.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where we've gone here and then this stuff starts popping up because we get, every time we see something, well, we need another rule, we need another rule, we need another rule. And pretty soon you can't do anything without causing yourself a problem. So.
It's often difficult to decide what the morality of the public is today versus 100 years ago. Like probably 100 years ago, my grandfather-in-law got called a liar. They met out in the street and the other guy is no longer alive as of that point. I'm not suggesting we do that, but it was a more serious thing to screw around with other people's property. And today we think it's a game.
Well, I also know that surveying techniques have changed over time as well. And if there's a 20 or 30-year period of time that's gone by and a new survey is because somebody buys and is suspicious, and all of a sudden everybody in the neighborhood's lots are all different because that beginning post is changed. What do they call it? The reference point. And then it is a big hassle, but nobody knew about it until somebody did this survey, resurveyed stuff. So and surveyors, that doesn't surprise me. The surveyor knows that can be a real problem. And you need a simple, informal way of taking care of the
And in terms of attitude too, I've seen the typical attitude of long ago. It seems like it's like you're trying to accommodate your neighbor. We don't do that anymore. You took a square foot. I think that's about $1,000. I don't know where that leaves us. Is flipping a coin acceptable?
I think there's three options. I think if the board wants to table it at this point, and staff is fine with that. If board wants to move forward and consider the ordinance itself at public hearing, of course, we're prepared to do that. The third option is to take it completely off the table because currently we have no real legal authority to be reviewing and approving or denying boundary line adjustments. We do by code currently have administrative determinations and both with respect to legal lot determination as well as conformance. And so if if that's the route we're going, I would propose that we, by policy, wholly take boundary line adjustment reviews off the table. And if somebody wanted to apply for administrative determination for legal lot status and or for conformance, that's currently available by code. And so that would be an alternative.
Well, I'm going to suggest maybe a fourth one, and that is to actually go back to BPAC with the background and the information so that they can see the spaghetti mess on some of these plots. That's a result of unreviewed boundary line adjustments. Because if they don't have that background going in, yeah, it's just more rules and regulations. But if it becomes this major problem in certain areas, perhaps that'll change somebody's minds.
Frankly, I think they're very familiar with those examples and circumstances. And my take on it is they're willing to accept those with the buyer beware clause.
That's kind of what I heard too.
Yeah.
And I believe when we first introduced the idea of this, they were shown some maps at the table. It was late fall when they were shown that.
Even
so,
if we wanted to kick off the effort.
yeah, before we even asked Doug his opinions and moved it forward. So they have seen original maps of what some of them create.
Well, I'll go along with what my two colleagues agree on, so. Because my district is pretty urban, so I mean, it's not an issue that I don't want to be the.
Would you repeat what you said at the very beginning?
I'll go along with what you two agree with.
Oh,
in terms
yes,
of,
yeah.
which one of those options to take. It's not an issue that affects too many of my colleagues or my constituents.
Well,
Doesn't cities.
although I'd like to, it's just complex enough. Typically I would like to hear it in a public hearing, but I don't have a lot of confidence we get anything useful out of that. No, my apologies to the public. And so in a situation like this, I would table it, or you'll just put that in the drawer to pull it out sometime if it becomes another issue?
Exactly. And so, and then while that's tabled in the interim, we would stop issuing approvals or denials of boundary line adjustments and direct people to apply for administrative determination, because we do have that available. Like, we have that authority under code currently, where we really don't for boundary line adjustments.
All right, run that by again. I'm not sure. So
So
go ahead.
somebody can apply for an administrative determination for legal lot status. And so, okay, we recognize that there's two legal lots of record to be adjusted. And as part of that, we could also issue a determination, an administrative determination for lot conformance, that what they're proposing would in fact or would not comply or be in conformance with current code, whether it be setbacks, access, drain field locations, underlying plat restrictions, whatever the case may be. And so we could make that administrative determination. What it does, where it falls short, it doesn't take it to the next step, is it doesn't actually create the boundary line adjustment. That burden is still incumbent upon the applicants, that they would need to record the appropriate documentation.
I should have rephrased the question. You made it sound like you have a process that's been in operation for a while. That doesn't change if this proposal just gets put away and tabled.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Nothing else changes.
It's just under a different name. We
Yeah.
wouldn't call it boundary line
You want to go
adjustment.
along with that, or just?
It's what we're doing now, right? And they have the ability to do that. How do we handle, say somebody did something in 2015 and they did it and it complied with, they knew what they were doing, it complied with everything that there was to comply with at the time. 2024, they come to you and how do we look at it? Do we look at it as when they did it, or do we look at what current code is?
We would look at what it was when they did it. So in that
So
instance,
they actually would be given, even if it didn't comply now with current code, it would be okay because it was when it was done, it complied with code.
So we
Is
would
that
get,
what I'm hearing?
exactly, we would issue a formal administrative determination of legal lots, non-conforming legal lot status.
Would you mind if I took a variance on that? It seems to me like if in 2015, I bought a piece of property thinking it had this boundary, and then in 2024, it turns out it doesn't have that boundary, and it belongs to my neighbor, I think I lose the property that's in question. Not the entire property, but just wherever the boundary line's supposed to be. Is that not right?
That would be up to the courts to decide. We would only be looking at.
It's a court issue, but
Correct, yes.
yeah.
The only reason if we're looking at it, does it say somewhere in there that we're looking at it at the time it was done? Cause Nick, logging Nick, brought up that it seems like it's changed where things were looked at one time, and I think he's talking about roads. I'm not sure. I think he's talking about roads.
It would, yes.
He says this was okay in 2007, but now here, and we're wanting to change the rules. Isn't that what he was talking about?
Right, that part of the conversation at BPAC was specific to private roads and,
But that has nothing to do with.
no, has nothing to do with boundary line adjustments, no.
But if the boundary adjustment is made, the informal one by the neighbors, whatever,
Mhm.
and it results in creating a lot that's non-conforming, say it cuts into the septic drain field. You have to have a certain amount and all of a sudden you lose a portion of it. That lot always had been non-conforming. The owners may not have known it. And then if it comes here, then all of a sudden what they've done is non-conforming use. They're operating.
Yeah.
Correct, in the
Because it
instance
was
of an existing
non-conforming
drain
at
field.
the time they did it.
Right.
I just want to make sure if it is conforming at the time they do it, that they don't get penalized later and told, oh no, you got to bring it up to this standard now.
Well, even at that, I might extend it depending on what the conformance is. But I was thinking of it something totally different, and maybe I'm just not on the right frequency. I don't like adverse possession laws where I've let my neighbor's kids play baseball in my huge backyard, and then all of a sudden my neighbor says he owns the property, or I can't, I think that's just horrible stuff because I'm a good neighbor and I share. All of a sudden I've got to pay a price on it.
Yeah. And I think Weyerhaeuser fought that in I'm forgetting the year, and I think they kind of won. So I don't know that you hear that all the time. Well, if your fence sits there for whatever, you lose the property. I'm not sure that's.
I know a good friend of ours, I think including you, who lost 7 acres like that.
Yeah, that's not
It
right.
went to court and it was like, yeah. Anyhow, it's an interesting
So
problem.
hearing, table it and use the administrative
Go on.
determination if somebody comes to the counter, and we'll take BLAs off our fee sheets.
That's what we're doing right now.
We're calling it a boundary line adjustment review right now, but we will quit using that word and start just talking about administrative determinations. Since we don't have an
So the
ordinance,
determination would just say, yeah, you have a legal lot or
correct,
you have this problems with the lot.
correct.
And that's the same thing you tell them now, whether you call it a boundary line adjustment or whatever.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And it's still, again, it will be incumbent upon the property owners, the applicants
To fix it.
to finish it, right?
At what point do they have to pay the $380 fee or whatever it was?
When they apply for the administrative determination.
And the informal one was going to be no cost.
They're the same.
By informal, meaning
Oh,
the
okay, You
unreviewed.
charge them,
Right,
no-
right.
if they show up, it costs them money.
Right.
Okay, that's why they don't show up,
Part of the reason.
I'm sure.
And a pertinent comment you made was title companies are notoriously evasive of responsibility.
Apparently.
They are.
And so tomorrow, it is on your board's agenda for the call for hearing. So can we just take it off, remove it, or
Okay.
whatever, you kill it at the beginning of the meeting. Okay, and then my other question is
We'll
we
make
need,
our own boundary line adjustment, drop from the agenda.
there you go, I like it. We need a seventh member for our planning commission.
Oh, yeah.
And we had at one time thought maybe your clerk of the board, Kelly, would be fantastic in that seventh position as an exempt employee. An arm to the board. We thought maybe that would be a good fit, but we're up to any nominee that the board would like to appoint. And you can think about it and come back, but we do need to get a seventh member sooner than later. That's it. Thank you.
Carolyn, elections.
Carolyn Fundingsland, Cowlitz County Auditor. I have a much less complicated topic in front of you today. So back in 2006, state law changed requiring all elections offices to form disability advisory committees. Cowlitz County did that. Our committee became very robust, actually won state awards several times, and we branched out and formed an ACAC instead, an Accessible Communities Advisory Committee, basically allowing Cowlitz County to tap into a pool of grant funds and allow us to branch out outside of our narrow focus of elections to help those with disabilities in our community. And
Now, was that, was that the group Sharon? Her name was Sharon
yes,
that did that, and then she branched out into a different office.
yes, she worked, she actually came into Cowlitz County through a grant-funded position, and part of that role was for her to form the committee. She was very good at it. She was retired at the time, even though we brought her back from retirement. She's still helping us in a very extra help type position, but she's still helping us, yes. So part of this ACAC agreement requires the board to sign an assurance letter every other year, basically stating that you agree with the terms and you're committed to following the rules. So that's what's before you tomorrow is another assurance letter. We converted back in 2017 and we've done a lot of great things, including the second floor. We remodeled all of the storefront entrances, assessors, treasurers, auditors. We received almost $70,000 in grant funding for that project to make them accessible.
So we've had this committee since 2017.
Yes,
So it's just a continuation.
just a continuation. And it's growing, actually. You're seeing that this is being, certain aspects of something similar are being required in other departments. So in our list of members, which we're required to provide to you, you'll see assessor's office is included, Public Works. They have a new member, an accessibility coordinator. I can't remember the exact title, but he's now a member. City of Longview, they're also required to do something similar. But this specific committee allows us to be very broad like that and have diverse membership and network together.
Is there, do you have anybody from Hall of Justice understand that there's some challenges in that facility for folks with disabilities?
They're invited. We'd love to have them if somebody would like to spend the time. We just had a meeting last week, our first meeting for 2024 last week. We don't meet frequently. It is a big commitment. We typically meet 2 to 3 times per year.
And the initial impetus was state said we need to have this stuff, right? Yeah.
Yes. It's actually, it's difficult to get those with disabilities to participate. They have assistance that they are accustomed to and comfortable with, and it's difficult to get them to participate or branch out. So, which is why we have a lot of you'll see in this membership, we have a lot of agencies dedicated to reaching out to that community. You have any questions for me?
Does it require all three of our signatures, or do we just designate the chair to sign for us?
You know, I would have to look into that. It's the GCDE, Governor's Department on Employment and Accessibility Issues or something like that, that requires it. So I would have to look into the act itself to see. Previously, all three commissioners have signed, but I can look into that.
All three did before. It was probably just set up to have all three of us sign. All right.
Good.
Have a good day.
Susan, I might go a little out of order here because I don't think you have much on here, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. I have 5 items, 4 of which are call for bids. We have the call for bids for aggregate but for bituminous surfacing treatment. So that's the aggregate for our chip seal program with a bid opening date of April 24th. We have a call for bids for furnishing various road surfacing materials. This is rock that we use for shoulders, ditches, things of that nature, and it's an open bid where we accept from all comers, and there's no set amount, so Castle Rock may need a load of riprap, so we now have a list of approved people to go purchase it from. So we do that every year, so this will open on April 24th, and once it's accepted, it'll be good till May 1st of 2025. That's how we run that contract. Then we have a call for bids for the Slide Creek Road realignment with a May 1st bid opening. And that road,
I can't remember that particular project. What kind of realignment? I mean, how extensive is that realignment?
so it's about, oh, I didn't look at it before I came, so let me pull my milepost. I accidentally print it really big today, so I don't need my glasses.
I think it's a curve we're taking out, right?
It is a curve. We're straightening out a curve. It's Slide Creek. It's from 1.40 to 1.55, so 0.15 a mile. I won't do math in public, so I don't embarrass myself. So it's over 500 feet, or about 100 feet. Sorry, I went wrong on my math. I told you I wouldn't do it. It's, so Slide Creek is aptly named. It's up against Slide Creek, and the road is sliding into the creek, so we're pushing the roadway away from the
And it's a
creek.
pretty narrow road to begin with, isn't it?
It
Is
is.
it single lane in part of the way, or I know it's a pretty steep angle going uphill.
It's just windy and narrow. Does not go to a single lane. So that one, we're taking that out to bid. It's 350,000 approximately. Project, all local funds.
Was that the one I think last week when you were in here, we had pictures of? Gave us
Yes,
pictures of one in the Slide
yes.
Creek where you had them moved over because the road was.
Yep,
Yeah.
that is this project.
Okay.
So, and then the other project I have for bid is not that one.
Must be,
Hazeldale.
Hazeldale slide repair. That's a 2022. That was one of the slides that occurred in the event that was not eligible. So that's replacing. We have a very rudimentary. We put some concrete blocks there to hold it up in the short term. So this project will install a soldier pile wall along that section, about 90 feet long. This is an ARPA project, and it's going to cost just about $800,000 to construct. So those are my bids, all coming out. Always excited for construction to get going. The other item that we have is an agreement with Terracon Consultants for materials testing services. We go out for this contract every 3 years. This is a firm that we use on an as-needed. So they collect concrete cylinders on a bridge, for example, and do the 7, 14, and 28-day breaks for strength. It's stuff that our staff does not do in-house. And we do a project-by-project basis. We are setting up a contract not to exceed $100,000. Our last contract, we used $67,000, and we have 2 big projects and then a couple bridges. So we thought 100,000 would be appropriate for over the next 2 years. And it's one of those, if we don't spend it, we don't use it, and it's all a unit cost. We have a price list from them, and so we know what we're going to pay up front.
As long as I have you there, a total non sequitur question. Sometimes on freeway sections, you'll see longitudinal rectangles of clearly different material as if, what's the purpose of those?
So I know one of the state's projects that they've been doing is they've been grinding out wheel tracks and replacing that pavement instead of doing the whole.
Right.
And that's for a cost savings, figuring that the pavement that's damaged is in those wheel tracks.
Yeah, this is different to that. It's more akin, I've seen circular patches as if someone is doing some sort of a coring on the freeway. Does that?
So they could be coring for the pavement, see what is there. I know that a few years ago, they did a lot of projects where there's rectangles about this big.
Yeah.
And they're going along and they're redoweling the concrete panels together. That was what that was for.
Ah,
Oh, I always
that's
wondered
probably
what that
it
was.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you guys want my little comment about how much surveyors have changed, well, back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they were paid partially in rum. So I can't get away with that anymore, but it explains why. So I watched History TV, and there was one about, if you look across New York State, there's this one little hitch in the line. Well, the surveyors got it wrong, and I think it's because they were paid half up front with their rum and drank too much when they were out there doing it.
That was the half bottle gone wine.
Yes.
Yes.
That never happened in
I will
Calhoun County in the
refrain
early
from
days.
any comments.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Gina, I think yours are left, right?
I think so. Good morning, Gina James, Health and Human Services. We just have a couple of items on the agenda tomorrow. 3 items on the consent agenda. These are the coordinated entry contracts that we've amended to reference the state contract. That gives us that flexibility with the funding source. So we have those amendments on.
When I looked through there and saw the red lines of the changes, it looked like it was just more stringent reporting requirements or
Let me take a look. We have to reference the state contract guidelines. So we did that piece.
I think
And
there
then
was-
I think we added I think because of the state contract, we added some language on, fraud and other loss reporting.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what it was. They were tightening that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think that's what they were doing, is trying to tighten up that language a
Yeah.
little bit.
That comes from the state contract. So if we're potentially using those funds, then we have to incorporate that into the contract as well. So yeah, so we have those 3 amendments in the consent agenda. And then we have one item on the motion agenda, which is the contract with Emergency Support Shelter for shelter operations. We do still have the match component included in there, as we discussed last week. And other than that, it's pretty routine. So
So they
Is
can
there
get to, they can get to the 150 if they raise 50 by themselves, and we do that extra 50.
right.
Right?
So-
And that's what we did with them last year. Yeah.
Yep. So sort of a dollar for dollar match in what they raise in private donations. Mhm.
But that's not part of this tomorrow's agenda, is it?
It is, that's on the motion agenda.
Oh.
We did that same amount last year, right?
Yes.
And the year before?
The year before it was 100,000,
And then we came up with the match concept.
correct.
Do you have any sense whether this is adequate?
I know that they were, really pleased to have the additional 50,000 for the match component. And I think that has helped. And they were excited it was going to continue for a second year. I can ask about if it's adequate.
Oh, no, it's all right. They should tell you if it's not, without you asking. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought
well,
that was kind of a good thing we did. We gave some incentive as long as they're raising private funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah.
that 100,000 comes from the dock fees?
The doc recording fees, yes, let's see. We did also add the same language in here referencing the state contract, just to give us that flexibility again. So if it's appropriate, we could potentially use the state grant funds instead of document recording fees. So we did, since we were doing the contracts anyways, we went ahead and added it into this one as well, so. Yeah. That's all I have on the agenda tomorrow.
I find that a little curious in that as far as the emergency support shelter is concerned, they don't care where the money comes from, right? So
No.
I'm not sure why that is in the contract.
It's just for flexibility, and I wouldn't want to, since we had the conversation around the coordinated entry contracts, we went ahead and added it in this one as well, just to have the flexibility, but I certainly wouldn't want to
I don't
use it.
understand that. What flexibility? I'm just saying we shouldn't even have any source statement in there. It's like, it's up to us to provide the money
Yeah,
from whatever source, and emergency support shelter has no control over that. So it shouldn't even appear in the contract. That's all I'm saying.
But if there
Sure.
is state funds for coordinated entry, that allows us more discretion on the document recording fees to spend.
Oh,
it
yeah,
on
no,
something
I
else.
understand that, but it's like.
But that gives you an out to
Yeah.
save more of
Yeah.
our doc recording fees.
yeah, and we don't necessarily call it out as a funding source in the contract, but if we're going to use the state funds, we have to pass certain references down in contract. So that's
Okay,
what
so,
gets us there is if we are going to use those state funds, there's certain grant requirements to pass down. Now, I wouldn't want to with this contract if it meant, that there were different parameters for them now, then I would want to keep it with document recording fees. But that's what it comes down to is if we do want to use the state funds, then there's certain grant requirements we have to pass down.
yeah, I think I understand that. So just to be clear, it's in the contract because the state requires you to identify that source for them being able to track it or trace it.
We have to reference the state contract guidelines and what have you. They have sort of their parameters for how the funds are used and what providers would have to do if we're using state funds for their
Okay,
program.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I
Okay.
will see you tomorrow.
Okay, Gina, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that covers everything under agenda unless anybody had any miscellaneous. If not, we'll move into human resources.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I don't have any HR requests this morning, but I do have one executive session.
Okay, for,
Performance of a public employee.
I'm not gonna put any pressure, but last week she nailed it.
No, she did great. How do you think? We'll start with 10.
Okay. I have one, or the other two, I have one for potential litigation, one for qualification. Those aren't,
Yeah, we're moving qualifications to next week or next time.
so we're not worried about that one today. We're just performance of a public employee is what we're working on today.
Yeah, and potential litigation is another item I'm not involved in that one, so.
Okay. Okay, we'll adjourn to executive session, performance of a public employee, 10 minutes.
The board is extending the executive session for a period of 5 minutes until 11:16 a.m. The board is extending the executive session for a period of 5 minutes until 11:23 a.m.
Okay. And you needed potential litigation? Is that and how long do you think, Kathy? Think 5? Is an attorney on the phone? Okay. Okay, we'll go back to executive session, potential litigation, 10 minutes.
The board is extending the executive session for a period of 5 minutes until 11:42.
Okay, we're back from executive session. No decisions were made. Kathy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. And I'm here to request on behalf of 4 employees that they be represented by the county for litigation in the matter of Matthew Mertz versus Cowlitz County.